Hello everybody, Justin with Lucky8 Off-Road, and today I'm going to show you how to install an SYA kit on a new Defender. And you're saying to yourself, what's an SYA kit? Well, we're gonna have to back that up real quick here. First things first, normally, if you wanna lift these new Defenders, or even LR3 and up kind of air suspension vehicles, we use lift rods. They're like 70 bucks, you get 1 to 2.5 inches of lift out of it, and it's a dream. The downside is, as you're lifting the vehicle, it's filling the air strut, making it taller. As it gets taller, the air strut gets firmer, and sometimes the car rides a little rough, depending on how much weight you have on the vehicle. These new Defenders are particularly notorious, and the V8 version with its aggressive dampening, after 1.5 inches, they get real bouncy and they're not comfortable to drive. So what the SYA kit does, by the way, save your ass is what it stands for, is this is one of the pieces that goes to the front. We're gonna put the air strut here. This sits on top of the air strut, allowing the air strut to sit down another 1 inch. And doing so, it will require less air to fill the air strut. What that means is you're getting your stock ride quality back. The car runs really nice down the road again, and you don't get to pogo. Also, you can go into high mode with lift rods without the pogo effect. All right, that was a lot to take in, but basic thing here is SYA good. All right, cue the intro, and we'll meet back here at this front tire. Okay, first thing you're gonna wanna do is find your airline. It's right here on the Defender. The new one, it is a 12 mil. We're gonna slowly take this off gently. It is your air suspension. I like to keep pressure down on it. What's gonna happen is the air is gonna start to leak out, right? So we're gonna hold it in, keep taking it off. There's a rubber O-ring in there we wanna watch out for. Okay. What that has done is released the pressure on the air strut. Little safety precaution. We're gonna put some tape over the hole. And we're gonna do that, why? Because we don't want any garbage falling in that air strut. So we'll just cover that up. That way there's no dirt or anything falling in there until we're ready to get back to work. Next step, we have to move to the lower portion. Okay, next up, we need to split the air strut from that lower aluminum arm right here. Look inside, you'll see it's got a seam, and it's squished with that bolt. There's the air strut we need to get out. So I'm gonna take off the sway bar link to loosen that up. I'm gonna take that bolt out. I'm gonna come on down here. I'm gonna take that control arm bolt out so that frees up this lower control arm. And I'm going to take this bolt out that holds the aluminum piece that is squishing the strut. I am gonna leave the strut attached for now. So there's a lot of bolts to take off. Nothing too hard yet. Okay, here we are at the hard part. You can see there's the strut we're trying to get out. There's the seam that we looked at earlier. Everything's loose. Oops, sorry camera. Everything's loose. What I'm gonna try to do is just gently pry this open. And you'll notice it's moving down. All right, you get the idea. I can't reach around the camera to get to it, but what we want to do is free that all the way up. You know what, maybe with the control arm out of the way now, because I left that in place, I should be able to free this up enough. Boom. There you have it. The aluminum piece is now out of the way. I'm just gonna let that hang. We're now gonna take, we're gonna drop the truck down so that we can get the strut out of the way. Here's the top of the air strut. Let's count 1, 2, 3, and 4. We gotta get those 4 bolts off. The other thing, which is critical, don't forget, take your electronic sensor. It's just a pinch and it comes off. That is for the damper. If you drop it, you're gonna be unhappy, and just double check your airline is free. So I'm gonna drop those 4 bolts and get the strut out. Okay, this next part is critical. We're going to, come on, zoom in for me, camera. We're gonna wanna nip this airline right here. It's flared. So we gotta push this ferrule back, and then we're gonna just chop the end of it off gently with a razor blade. I'll set up the camera, show you how I do it. Now we need to remove all of these pieces. Whatever you do not lose that little ferrule piece, and don't try to pry it open because it'll snap on you and then we'll be out of luck. So we're gonna keep that. We have to keep its orientation, right, which is the thinner portion right here, mates up to that. There we go, got them off. We're gonna set those aside. Okay, we're getting ready to install this airline. So want to make sure that the end is nice and clean. We're going to put the nut portion on first. Then we're going to take the ferrule. And you've got to, let's see if I can bring that in for you. It has a taper to it. Come on, camera, work with me. It has a taper, there you go. And we want to make sure that that taper is going towards the nut. As you tighten this down on the airbag, it's going to seat inside like that. And critical is this other ferrule. So we're gonna push that in. So as you tighten everything down, it allows this brass piece to grab onto the plastic and the tube won't deform. So now we'll get everything in place, push it all down towards the end, and we're gonna put it on the airbag. We're gonna push this in. We're gonna push that and start to tighten it up by hand. Okay, it's almost all done. I'm gonna put the wrench on it, give it a little bit of a twist, but it's plastic. This is not where you try to show everybody how strong you are. Personally, I think that's good enough, but again, I just wanna get the wrench on it. Helps if you get the right wrench. There you go. Next up, we're going to put the spacer on. Okay, the spacer portion is pretty easy. You just want to line up your airline, put it on, but you can't jam it in. You gotta leave a little bit of space. We're gonna put the nuts in, get them started, all 4 bolts. The reason it's like that is because we want this spacer to be as short as possible without having to cut the studs on the air strut. So if we make the spacer too thick, the car gets real floaty, and if it's not thick enough, then it gets too bouncy. Okay, we're gonna hyperspeed this. I'll tighten all these down. With everything tightened down, your air strut should look like this. You've got the SYA on the top, the red airline. All we're gonna do is put everything back together in reverse. I get the air strut in place. I don't totally tighten it down, that way I got a little bit of wiggle room, but I definitely let it hang from the studs. Put the aluminum bracket that sandwiches this right here. There is a little tab, there's an alignment, you can't mess it up. If you do, it just won't go together. And there's also a notch here, right here. The bolt has to be above that. So you want to push this in far enough, or push the aluminum piece on. You know what, when we're there, I'll see if I can bring it in. You probably can't see it, but if I can, I'll show you. So I'm gonna skip ahead to where everything's put together because there's no reason to watch me do it in reverse. See you in a minute. Here's a little behind the scenes. I'm using this blue cart, which is basically a jack, and I'm pushing up all my linkages back together, except for the sway bar, we'll get that in a minute. Putting pressure on the bottom, which is then putting pressure on our aluminum piece, which is allowing the strut to slide forward. Basically a D2 bottle jack. And then I can see straight through the hole. The little metal tab is exactly where it needs to be. Can put the bolt in and move forward. With everything back in where it's supposed to be, and remember we said we're gonna hold off on that sway bar link, that's where the lower portion of your limiting strap goes. Goes here on the sway bar link, and then goes up here on this little bolt I'll show you here. It's right there. In order to take that apart, we need to get into the engine bay. So let's take a pop up to the engine bay and we'll get that thing loose. With the air box out of the way, I show you how to take the air filter apart in a different video if you need help with that. But most of you guys won't have any problems. It's just a few torques. That is the bolt we're looking for. We're going to take this off and put on the limiting strap. Okay, there you have it. I've put the bolt back in place with, you should still flashlight. Bolt's back in place. I'm not winning today with the flashlight. All right, there's our bolt back in place for the 3rd time. Limiting strap in place, and it's down here to the sway bar link. Let's get these things all tightened up. And finally, the little coupler. Put that on. You want to make sure it seats all the way down. It should stop, and then the same for the upper. Be able to pull on it. If you yank it too hard, you'll rip the airline out, but double check that it's good. This part is done. We can move to the back. All right, moving to the back, the strut, I said be quiet. The strut section is much easier to do than the front because we're not doing anything with, one more time and I'll take your battery away. We're not doing anything with the airbag, so we just gotta find 3 nuts that hold the top of the shock in. We're gonna drop that shock down, bolt on our SYA spacer, and then put it all back together. The 110 is the easiest. You just fold up the little cargo area and you'll be able to access them. The 90 is a little bit tougher. They're underneath the seat. Luckily for me, there's no seats in this 90. And the 130, they're right in front of the third row. So if you were looking at the third row, there's a little plastic access. That one's pretty easy too. I'll bring the camera in. I'll show you what I'm talking about. We're gonna get these things loose, pick the car up, take the strut out, slap on the SYA, put it in, life will be grand. Right there is the top of the shock. 1, 2, and the third nut is behind it, super easy. We're gonna take off the electronic dampener wire, and just for reference, here's the other one. If you've got a mild hybrid, be very careful back here because there's all kind of battery packs and wires and whatnot. So just stay on target, only work on those 3 things. We'll get the shock dropped. Next up is the lower shock bolt. We're gonna take that off. Now you gotta remember, as you're pulling this out, the shock's gonna come flying down. So what I like to do is hold on to it and then just back it out with the ratchet. Okay, here we are, basically final lap. Job is almost done. We need to attach the SYA. Don't fight with me. And you're gonna notice you can't put it on because the studs are too long. The reason is, we already talked about this in the front, that the spacer will become too thick and then the car will become too soft, and especially in the back, that's where we're carrying a lot of weight. So we wanna actually take advantage of the inflated air spring and keep the vehicle running a little bit stiffer. There's 2 ways to go about it. You can just lob about 1 inch off of the stud, bolt everything up, or you can pound the studs out and put in some hardware. It's really eat a pie, bake a pie. I don't see a downside to either one. I personally like just to pop them out because my luck is I'll cut this and then the thread will get messed up. So you know what, I think I figured it out. Pop them out if you can. The downside to popping them out is you're gonna have to get really, really creative with a wrench to get in there and hold it because the spacing is super tight. You won't be able to get a socket in there. All right, hyperspeed where we knock this out. With everything tightened down, just reinstall. If you've got an extra hand, a friend, this is when you want them, because that way you can send the strut up and then they can tighten down on top. Or what I do by myself is I put the lower portion in and then I use the jack to push this up very, very carefully and align the studs. We'll skip to the end because I don't think you need to see me putting 3 bolts on, and we'll meet at the front of the car. Well, there you have it. Let's do a quick recap. Make sure you've tightened down all of your suspension components to the proper spec. That's what holds your tires on the car, very important. Next thing I'd like to bring up, if you have a friend to help you, makes it way easier. I struggled, but trying to put the strut up and then put the nuts on it in the front, and especially the rear, is very difficult to do by yourself. So if you have a friend for that, make the job way easier. You can take a little bit of soapy water and put it on the airlines to make sure there's no leaks. And aside from that, we're gonna call this job done. And another thing I want to point out is this car is now sitting at its bump stops, and 35-inch tires still fit. The car still can turn the wheel left and right. So in other words, if you have an air suspension failure and you have the SYA, save your ass, you can still move with oversized tires, and that's how they became part of our parts arsenal, and it's actually one of the most important kits you can get for an air suspension car with oversized tires. All right, guys, I'm sure you're sick of hearing me ramble on, so on that, I'll see you on the next one.